Those who have weird neighbors. What does your neighbor do that is weird or creepy? My parents have a neighbor that is obsessed with my mom. It was innocent enough at first, he was just nice and they'd have small conversations. They became friendly and we would invite him over for BBQs and everything. Then he started to get creepy. Every single time my mom would take the dog out he would appear outside and want to talk her. He would find an excuse to come knock on our door every single day. He got the same haircut and grew the same goatee as my dad and started to dress like my dad. He then went and bought the exact same type of motorcycle as my dad. He started showing up at my mom's work bringing her lunch and flowers. That's when my dad had to confront him and it almost became physical. He has mostly stayed away since then. I have a neighbor in my apartment block who sings opera. Not poorly singing over a recording, but singing well on his own. I live next to a school known for its music program, and he's clearly an upper level opera student. It's never loud enough or late enough to bother me, and he's quite good at it. A few times he's had a woman over, and they've practiced together. He's my weirdest neighbor, but also one of my favorites. My neighbors sometimes bang on the wall in the middle of the night. Luckily it doesn't tend to bother me too much, because I'm generally still awake playing the drums. They videotape us 24/7. Whenever we come home they stand on their front porch and watch us. They put a big wire fence up between our houses a few years ago. If we are backing out of the driveway they come and watch to make sure nobody hits the fence. Also, their entire house is covered in plants. I can't see in any of the windows. It's very weird. If it's snowing and we accidentally shovel a tiny bit of snow through the wire fence they will come out and shovel all their snow onto our side. They will cut down trees on our property that are too close to them and throw all the branches in our driveway too. Also have paintballed our house. All because we didn't lend them money a few years ago. We built a fence on our property line, a few feet into ours actually, and the night it was finished I hear banging outside. I go to the sunroom we have downstairs and see a headlamp moving back and forth quickly. I go outside and see my neighbor throwing lead pipes into our fence screaming, "Can you see me now?" and kept repeating that over and over again. Soon after he spots me and runs back inside. I'm pretty sure I'm the weird neighbor. But one time I farted pretty loudly and my downstairs neighbor laughed. My neighbors are foreign nationals from China, and I don't think they quite understand the concept of a BBQ. I was standing on my balcony one afternoon when my neighbors burst out onto their patio quite loudly and break out a great big grocery bag full of meat. Whole Foods bag by the look of it. So one can imagine the meat wasn't cheap. Dude turns up the heat and throws about 7-8 steaks on the grill. Straight. No seasoning. No nothing. Puts the cover back on. Then walks back inside. About 5 minutes and the meat smell is wafting my way. I'm not complaining because it smells pretty good. 20 minutes later and I'm getting worried because it is well overdue for this guy to flip the steaks. Nothing. Another 20 minutes. Those steaks are definitely suffering by now. The meat smell is still there, but it's starting to smell a bit charred. Nothing. Another hour and a half goes by and these steaks are definitely charcoal by now. The smell of meat has gone, and it has been replaced by the smell of charcoal and propane. I'm guessing the tank has run out, because I have the same Weber grill and it only fits one tank inside. I hear the guy's Porsche Macan pull back into his garage and the whole family bursts out with leftover bags from some woos. Guy goes back to the grill, opens it up to witness a bunch of bricks of inedible hunks of charcoal. Takes some selfies and pulls them off and throws them on the grass. Fricking what the actual frick. Across the street, neighbor feeds the stray cats outside. After he empties the food on their plate, he runs his fingers inside of the can and licks the remaining cat food off his fingers. The people who live next to me like to invite all the other neighbors over for BBQ and whatnot. When I first moved in it was the only time they had come over to invite me. I'm not super sociable, so I politely declined. Once I'm home I enjoy my solitude. Probably my own fault though for choosing an apartment complex that tries to promote community. Apparently the fact I wasn't in the mood to socialize must have deeply offended them considering they spread a rumor around the neighborhood that I'm a drug addicted ex-convict. That's not what's creepy though. What's creepy is how every time I take my dog for a walk, My neighbors will come outside and just glare at me with crossed arms. It's the consistency with how they do it too. It could be 3 AM, and here comes the husband in his underwear to give me dirty looks. Not at all creepy. Just weird. My neighbor landscapes my yard. We have like 90 square foot townhouse yards. And I guess he can't get enough yard work out of his. So far he's installed some stone paths, put in a retaining wall in the front, and now he's planting stuff in the wild area. I hate yard work so much I pay a service to keep my macro yard lit up to city code. So I've told him whatever he wants to do is fine. Still super weird to come home from work and find a new feature in front of my house. I have these neighbors that live way behind me, down a long and secluded driveway. They aren't really weird per se, but a nice, country, elderly couple in their late 80s/early 90s. Save for one odd habit of his. He kills buzzards and wires their decomposing bodies to his fence. I discovered this when I took my toddler son back there to trick or treat his first time. We are walking down that long ass driveway of fizz and hay. Looky there. Big ass dead buzzards. Wings outstretched to the fullest. Decomposing on the fence. I was just like, well, that's not something you see every day, and went right on to their door, dearly wanting to ask about them. I couldn't be like, trick or treat. What's up with the buzzards? So I had a neighbor, 80 or more, widowed guy. Every time I get the newspaper delivered to my mailbox, when I open it, I find the crosswords done. I don't do them, or give a damn. A day I decided to try catch who's doing my crosswords. Day 1. 8 AM. They were already done. Day 2. 7:30 AM already done. Day 3. 7 AM I decide to give up. One day, 4 AM, I was getting back home from a night out. While I was passing by the mailbox, nothing yet delivered. So I placed my GoPro inside and went sleeping. The next day, finally got it. It was my neighbor. He has done the crosswords right up on my mailbox. For like 10 minutes, I will try to find the video, but it was absolutely cute. Staring at my door time to time, and scratching his head. Next day, I took him a 1000 crosswords book, drop it right his door, rang the bell, and stayed on my car discreetly. He took some time to open the door, then found it. I swear it was the happiest person, like a kid that got a puppy. He stayed in his porch and passed like 2 hours doing crosswords, then fell asleep lol. The next day, I was getting back home from work. He came to apologize, like a kid that has to confess something, and brought some cookies. We stayed talking about his WW2 service and how the world changed. I frequently bought him crosswords books until he passed away 1 year ago. May he rest in peace. Not so much creepy, just weird. I've lived in my current place for a few years now. My upstairs neighbors moved in about 2 years ago, and they're interesting people. When they first moved in, they would have really loud sex. Their bedroom is right above mine. I wasn't bothered by this because it's an apartment. You get used to that crap, and B, they did it in the evening. So it wasn't like they were waking anyone up. I always left it alone. One night a few months into their first year, I was trawling around on the top floor outside because the gutter was clogged and the apartment maintenance team is slow as crap. So I was unclogging it myself with a yardstick. My upstairs neighbor came out onto the deck and I nearly scared the crap out of him. But I told him I was just the downstairs neighbor and he relaxed. We got to talking, and then he suddenly got nervous and said, "Hey, me and my girl, we aren't disturbing you, are we?" I laughed and said, "No, I get it. I have a boyfriend too." He said, "Okay, but we'll still try to keep it down." And he went back inside. Ever since then, they've played loud music every time they have sex to try and cover it up. It's kind of adorable. They had music playing for 6 hours over the weekend one day, and I gave my neighbor a grin and a thumbs up the next day when I ran into him. Not my neighbor but a friend's. Lady used to put her car in neutral and push it down the driveway because she said it saved her $sign on gas. Same lady would also get on her hands and knees and trim her yard with scissors after the lawn care company was done. Oh, I just remembered. I also have a neighbor that collects PT Cruisers. He's got at least 6 of them and washes them all the time. Seems like a weird car to collect. They aren't vintage or anything. I've caught my neighbor probably like 5-6 times just staring at me through the window with complete focus. My neighbor sets off huge fireworks in the street throughout the year and just shoves the remains/trash down the sewer. Take that, Pennywise. We are pretty sure that the lady who lives across from us is a high-end prostitute. We're in a good neighborhood, but she has a wide variety of older men visit her at all hours of day. She's the only person on the block who doesn't come to our block parties or socialize. But once she asked my neighbor to mow her lawn and, upon completion, decided not to pay him because the work wasn't of a good enough quality. It was actually decent, and he was 12 years old. For heaven's sake, we now refer to her as that lady and everybody knows who we are talking about. My next door neighbors keep using our stuff. They've been caught with their hose attached to our water, taking our outdoor chairs, etc. They also have no problem honking their car horn repeatedly at any time of day or night when someone isn't getting out of the house fast enough. There's a senile old lady in the apartment behind me. Every time I take my dogs out, she gives me dirty looks. When she sees my girlfriend, she smiles and talks to her, introduces herself every time, as if they've never met. Then I walk outside and she scowls. This morning I took my dogs out. Her blinds were open and she was looking out the window. I saw her and smiled. She shut the blinds, never smiling. I've given up on saying good morning, smiling, etc. At my parents' house growing up, he was a horrific gossip and would literally run outside when he saw you to talk about so and so. Anyways, one time I fricked up and needed some plan B. I go to the store and he's there. I notice him following me aisle to aisle, so I double back him, grab the birth control, and split for the checkout. I was in the clear until the dumbass cashier couldn't open the box and yells to her boss, I need help opening this plan B. Of course he freaking showed up. So the next day I have a pit in my stomach because I knew he was going to tell the neighborhood. I pass these two old ladies who mentioned the plan B I took once they assumed I was out of earshot. One said not to tell my mom. It was my business, and she understood how rough that must have been. The other commented the neighbor had no business sticking his nose in a teenager's life, and she was going to talk to him. My mom never found out. I had a neighbor, alcoholic/druggie, who thought there were two women living in my house. I had dyed my hair blonde from brunette. He continually asked where the brunette was and how she was doing. I finally just said she was fine. We had some that pretended to be upstanding religious people. Well, son was a big time drug dealer. Dad lost his security clearance because of it, and the mother was a raging bitch. We'd hear her screaming in the front yard on Sunday mornings, get your freaking Bibles and get in the freaking car. We are going to be late. I'm not sitting in the back of the goddamn church. On and on. They also let their dogs crap in the front yard instead of the backyard like normal people. The mother came to our door once and screamed at my mother about my sister being a slut and coming in all hours of the night. Well, she worked in a bar and she had the drug dealing son. She kept trying to push the door open, so my sister called the cops. That was the start to the dad losing his security clearance. He should have divorced her because he wasn't a terrible guy. Do housemates count? If so, drinks a 2-liter bottle of cola every freaking day. Buys it from the corner shop, so it costs double as well. Stole female housemates' leather trousers and wanked all over them. Pretended to fall outside an Albanian car wash garage in order to get compensation from them. Is now in great fear of Albanians. Had another guy stay for about a month. Heard him say about 3 words whilst there, like you say hi, and he just walks past. Quite antisocial in that regard. Although he never caused a problem, it was just odd. Apartment living is amazing. I hear my neighbor throw up/dry heave every morning. A friend of mine has a neighbor who sometimes walks around in a gas mask. No one can confirm who he is. We got a new guy who can't contain his belongings to his own space. Each condo in the building comes with 2 tandem parking spaces. He owns 5 motorcycles and 3 cars. So that's not enough. They give him another set of tandem spaces. And, here's the only reason anyone gives a crap, part of the fire lane in the garage. You saw that. The hoarder of the building decided money was more important than safety. So he's got 3 motorcycles in an area actively obstructing the fire lane, which is also against their own stupid HOA rules. Not to mention fire codes. But he's not done. You can tell which apartment this guy's in, because he's the only one with a huge planter next to his door, in the damn fire lane. The planter has grown. It's now got 2 plastic flamingos, a wagon, and a stroller, all in an active fire safety footpath. Why do I care about fires? We're in California. So he has a truck and a car, both kind of old and beat up. Every day he switches their parking places, and every day he leaves the car running, opens the hood and just stares at the engine for about an hour. He'll step back for a smoke break, eyes still hard on the running engine from afar. Sometimes he'll sit in the driver's seat and listen to the one tape he has left apparently, and it's Sheryl Crow, every single day. My neighbor's kid stands on our shared fence and chews it. At my old house, we had a neighbor who was freaking bat crap. His name was Ed, and he lived on a hill right above from us. He would always invite me over when I was a little kid, to play with his chickens and rabbits. But my grandmother always said no. I never understood why. Ed built a shed with 1 window only, facing our house. This is weird, because there's no view on the side my house is on. The view would have been to the left. There was no logical reason for him to face the only window towards our house. Ed also didn't work with tools, so we could never pinpoint what the shed was for, as they had a basement in their house where they stored stuff. My grandpa built a literal 20-foot fence on the side of our house that faced his house. I didn't know why it was so tall, and it was a common joke among my friends when we were younger. One day, me and my grandmother were in the pool, and my grandpa caught Ed peeping through a hole in the fence. He would also walk by the yard when my grandma was mowing, and tell her he enjoyed watching her mow in her shorts. When I got to high school, he would stand at the top of our yard, wait for me to come home when no one else was there, and come on the porch when I was trying to unlock the door, making random ass conversation, and always asking me if he could come in. When I was a freshman in college, my grandpa found a stepping stool underneath my closet window, like someone had been trying to be peeping. Ed was a dumbass. His initials were painted on the underneath. Ed and his wife has a daughter, who was pregnant with twins. Unfortunately, she ended up miscarrying them both later in the pregnancy. They had a funeral for them, and my grandmother was asked by Ed's wife, would like to hear that Ed's wife was a very kind woman, worked with my grandma, but had no idea how creepy her husband was. If while they were at the funeral, my granny could take their dog out, she accepted. Ed's wife was supposed to bring the keys, but Ed showed up instead. My grandma was alone. Ed apparently told my grandma how he'd love to get her naked and tried to kiss her. My grandma slammed the door in his face, locked it, and called my grandpa. Ed stood and paced around our porch for 15 minutes before he finally left. Remember, he did this 30 minutes before his grandbaby's funeral. My grandpa showed up, went on his property, and told him if he ever saw him come close to me or my grandmother ever again, he would end his life. I've since moved out, but my grandparents say they don't get much trouble from addition. He has a in-home nurse now due to Parkinson's, and threw a fit when he found out he had a male nurse because he wanted a female nurse instead. Ed's known in my old neighborhood for creeping on women. Luckily all our neighbors knew how weird he was and were always on the lookout. Moral of the story, make sure you don't have an Ed next door. TD, LR, had creepy neighbor named Ed who was a peeping Tom, and always made the moves on my grandmother. I don't live next to these neighbors anymore, but my next door neighbors had a habit of threatening each other with guns whenever they argued. It wasn't uncommon for their kids to come to our house for safety and to borrow a phone. One or the other was regularly arrested because of this. It was very rare that a month passed and this didn't happen at least once. It was weird to say the least. My husband and I live in a small cul-de-sac. One of our neighbors had a couch, chair, and a couple of boxes out on the curb the day before trash day. We noticed it, but just assumed whoever it was had made arrangements to have the trash service pick it up. No big deal, until later that day when my husband got an email from the HOA president that another one of our neighbors, whom we've never even met, was greatly upset by this. Assumed it was us that left the stuff out on the curb. and was ready to call the cops because she was afraid otherwise she would be responsible for getting rid of it. Still not sure why she thought it was us. Of all people in the cul-de-sac, we pretty well keep to ourselves and don't have junk laying around outside the house or anything like that. And sure enough, the stuff was hauled away by the trash service the next morning. Grew up with neighbors downstairs who would complain about every little noise, like walking across the floor, running a bath, flushing the toilet, laughing. They used to bang up all the time, and it was a rented flat, so they used to make official complaints as well. Couldn't listen to music, not even quietly, had to use headphones. Couldn't even play the board game Frustration, the one with the dice in a bubble, because they would bang up. So yeah, weird people. I'm convinced my neighbor is a meth/crack addict. Strange people come to his door at all hours of the day. The cops have visited a handful of times this past year, even knocking on my door a couple times to ask if I know where he is. Doesn't leave his car if we arrive home at the same time. Waits until I go inside. A guy who lives in the building next to me is always naked. That's totally fine. But he always has his windows open, and he lives on the first floor. It's getting to the point where, whenever I go out to get the mail or just leave my apartment, he's just blaring 30 and standing in plain sight going to town. Now my girlfriend is anxious about bringing her friends over because Fappy Stan could be doing his thing at any moment of the day. Me, my boyfriend and his housemates, his best mate and the partner, live in a half block. So this lovely lady, let's call her Jan, lives in the front house. We live behind her house and there is a fenced off driveway for us to get to our house. We own 2 dogs and one is a very young, lively Whistler. She has an obsession with him. I constantly catch Jan peering over the fence to check on him as she thinks we don't treat him right. He is our baby who we dedicate our lives to. Lol. I will regularly find new toys, meaty bones, tennis balls etc on our property. That is definitely not from us. She constantly questions us on our dog's diet, if he gets fed enough, if he's cold outside, if he's getting enough treats, and she even gifted him her dead dog's jumper. Now our dog uses this against Jan, and we recently got a call saying our dog escaped, but she reassured us that it's okay and she will look after him for the day. I don't know what she did, but I've never seen my dog bolt so fast out of a room. All in all, lovely lady, although weirdly obsessed with my dog. They have 7 sets of wind chimes all tuned in different keys, making sleep difficult on windy nights. I leave for work at around 6 AM. Most days my neighbor is in his truck, with it running, drinking a drink, smoking a cigarette, and reading the newspaper. I had to ask. He's a single dad with 2 teenage kids. He likes to get up early and read the paper, but doesn't want to disturb the kids. It's a 1600 SQFT house with a master bedroom and 2 living rooms, and he can't find a place quite enough to read the paper. I'm trying not to judge the 6 AM drink either. Not so weird or creepy, but I have a neighbor who is, by all appearances, very nice. One day he tells me we should get together and I agree, thinking that it'll be nice to have a friendship with someone lives next door to me. So we get together, and it's a freaking multi-level marketing pitch. 9 years later we're really little more than acquaintances. Always talks to me from his side of the fence, but he never shows more than his eyes when he does it. He also only goes by his last name. My neighbor killed a lamb on the street across our building. When we moved, our neighbor was about 85. I spoke to him a couple times the whole time I lived there, about a decade. He's lived there pretty much his whole life. He hoarded things. His house was filled with clutter and no one in the area had really got a good look inside. The most I've seen of it is the pictures he gave us of our cat, who liked to hang out in his house. When she passed away, he had a camera obsession for a bit. He was showing a new camera off to his other neighbor, and showed her some pictures he took. Pictures he took from his bedroom window, of her garden, when she was in it. He didn't mean anything weird by it, I don't think. He didn't seem to talk to many people, didn't have a lot of family. He went into a home a few years back. Haven't heard anything since, and I've moved away now. When I was younger, my family and I lived next to a family of Orthodox Jews. I'm pretty sure they hated and judged us hardcore, because the family that lived in our house before us had also been Jewish. And then we roll in like the Griswolds with our 30,000 Christmas lights and North Pole lawn ornaments. Their little girl would stare at us from her bedroom window, unsmiling, unblinking, staring. She had these piercing green National Geographic eyes, and you got the sense she would have tried to see straight to your soul if she thought you had one. They had a pack of tiny Pomeranians that barked day and night, and every so often one would get out, and we'd have to carry the burly dog back to its owners, who were never grateful. It was an odd couple of years. We have about 70 meters of bushes that separate our gardens. Our neighbor cuts the bushes excessively thin on his side, so he can watch us through the bushes. He does this exclusively at stretches of bushes, where we spend time so next to our door and our backyard where we used to sit in the sun, or play football with my 6 and 7-year-old brothers. You can see his side of the bushes when you're on the main road, and the bush everywhere is dense, and about 2 feet thick aside form those spots. Anytime we open the door, makes a noise, we can hear him turning off his lawnmower and making his way to the same place we are. But on his side, landlord lost his crap at him, so the guy bought fencing to put up where he had blatantly cut the bush too thin. This fence is purely a decorative one, and can be seen low at head height. Whenever we leave the house, we can hear him finishing what he's doing, and he'll be standing down at the front gate to watch us leave. My mom's also caught him a few times staring through the bush into our kitchen. Very large window at our dining table, where mom spends most of her time, so we keep the blinds down all the time. Got reported to the guards years ago for indecent exposure and some other weird crap not related to us. We just don't go in our yard anymore, because he's technically not doing anything wrong, and we can't stop him. I'm definitely the weird neighbor. I swim with my dog almost every day. I stay up really late and go on lots of midnight or later night walks. I'm also antisocial and try to avoid them as much as possible. Anytime someone goes out the front or back door, he'll mysteriously have to put things in the bins or trim some plants, then go back inside when no one is out. Same thing when car headlights come in or leave the driveway. If anyone is out in the garden, he'll be exactly parallel in his garden, not talking but just there presumably listening. He'll leave his car parked really close to the edge of his driveway that joins onto us, so we can't park cars far up the driveway without fear of hitting his car with the doors. If he manages to get his hands on a package we can't sign for, he'll read off any signage to try decipher what's in there and question us on it when we ask for it back. This last one is less creepy, but more just awful human. One time during heavy winds we had a tree snap but hang suspended right at the bottom of our driveway near the road, and he parked down there right underneath where it would fall. Having never parked down there before, no clue whether this was just to cause commotion or to claim insurance, but he'd not long bought the car from new, so who knows. Not our neighbors, but us. We have a cat named Ketchup. He likes to go outside and sometimes he's gone for days at a time. We don't know where he goes, but we call for him every night that he's gone, and he eventually comes back. Anyway, our neighbors asked why we yell for condiments in the evenings sometimes. We explained that Ketchup is our cat. Not one family per SE, but there is a nearby house that seems to have new people move in and out with no notice or signs of a move. There was a single mom with 2 kids who was replaced by a different single mom with 2 kids at one point. It took me a few weeks to realize they were different people. I thought she had just bought a new car instead. Then one day they were gone, and now it is just some single guy living there. There is stuff on the porch and in the driveway that stayed consistent through each of these changes. Oh, and during the blood moon a few years ago, one of the single moms that lived there had some friends over, and they all did a ritual in the front yard when the moon turned red.